you here gathered together tonight. My name is Corey Millette, and I am one of the pastors here at Matthews United Methodist Church. And on behalf of Matthews and our Global Impact Ministries here, we welcome you and are so glad to see so many of our Matthews folks. But we can also tell that there are some new friends in the room with us this evening, and we are glad to have you here with us as well. If you are a part of Matthews, would you raise your hand for us tonight? Excellent. We're so glad to see so many of you here, and I hope those of you who are visiting with us this evening took note of whose hands went up. So if you need to locate a restroom or need to know where all the ins and outs are of the church, I know all of them would be more than happy to help. But if you do need a restroom during our time together this evening, you can just go right out that door right there and straight up the hallway, and there are some signs there in the hallway to point you in the direction that you need to go in order to find those restrooms. And please know that any of us here this evening would be more than happy to help find where you need to be. So we are just thrilled to be gathered together. Part of my role here, in addition to being a pastor, is I get the great privilege of working alongside of our youth and our college age and young adult ministries here at Matthews. And the raising of awareness of human trafficking, both here in the United States, but also globally across our world, has been something that has been a great passion of mine, along with several of our students within our ministries. Many of them have done their graduate projects from high school based on human trafficking in the Charlotte area and raising awareness with their schoolmates. And it's just been really incredible to see the heart that our young people in our community have about sharing this message. And in fact, we have been traveling for the last 3 years to San Pedro, Belize, to work with a dear friend of mine named Brittany Travis, and our students have been working within the community of San Pedro to help to empower the women there, to find artisan trades, to be able to figure out what life could look like for them, and to help to encourage them and for them to recognize God's value that lives within their heart. And so my prayer is that during our time together tonight, we as a community will continue to learn about how we can come alongside so many of the wonderful organizations here stateside as to how we can raise awareness and work together, because it truly does take a village. And so I hope that tonight will be really informational for all of us here, but might even spur some questions about how we can do things better. We also recognize that anytime that we gather together and talk about something similar to human trafficking, something that just causes our hearts to be heavy, maybe causes us to think of people that we know in our own lives, it tends to build a variety of emotions for us. And so I hope that tonight that you will know that this place, this is a safe place for us to wrestle and to ask questions and to really get to know our hearts and how we can be a part of this movement. And please know that I will be here throughout the evening and will even stick around towards the end as well. So if there's something going on in your life or in someone you know's life that we here at Matthews can be a part of and just try to help to find some relief for them or for you, please feel free to talk to me this evening. I would welcome that conversation and just however we can be of assistance to you tonight. So as I mentioned, this event this evening is sponsored by Global Impact Ministries here at Matthews. And Amy DeBoer will share a little bit more with you in a few minutes about what Global Impact is and how we are a part of the community here in Matthews, but also all around our world. But before we do that, I'd love to start us off with a prayer tonight. So will you pray with me? Gracious and loving God, we just give you thanks for the opportunity to be gathered in this space this evening. And God, we pray that our hearts and our minds will be open to all that is shared. God, that we will be willing to hear the hard things and then put our hands and our feet into action to do something, to make a change, to make a difference in our world. And God, I pray for the ministries that are represented here this evening, for Justice Ministries here in Charlotte and Present Age Ministries in Concord. God, we just lift up the ministry work that they are doing in our community. And God, we give you thanks for them. We thank you for all of the women and the families that they represent. Father God, may we hear you through all of the things that are shared tonight, so that, God, we can continue to be your hands and feet in this world. God, we just are so thankful for a place to gather together, to have conversations, and to learn how to be better disciples for you. So, Father God, we love you and we praise you, and we pray all of this tonight in your heavenly name. Amen. So as I mentioned, we have a video for you this evening for us to kick off learning a little bit more about what Global Impact does here at Matthews.
I'm a Christian in the making. That's what we call ourselves. Christians in the making. But we're being made. And that makes the difference. If you're a child of God, you're not inferior. You're in the family of God. And that can be set the outcast of anybody anywhere.
St. John says, how can you say that you love God whom you don't see if you do not love your neighbor whom you see?
The call is to loose the bonds of injustice, undo the thongs of the yoke, let the oppressed go free. But let me be a witness that these are not things that happen all at once. The challenge is to wake up each day and live out the actions of your vocation, slowly by slowly, to faithfully enter into the world.
Did you hear that, friends? We exist not for us. We exist not to serve us or to make us happy. We're here for the world.
We believe that everyone has value, no matter your gender, race, cultural or socioeconomic background. We believe that God has given us the amazing privilege of sharing the message of God's love through word and action. We believe that God has placed within us the ability to make a difference in this world. As Matthews United Methodist Church, we partner with local, national, and international ministries to fight addiction, extreme poverty, abandonment, and lack of access to the good news of God's love.
Global Impact exists to share the love of Jesus outside the walls of Matthews United Methodist Church. It is our hope that you will experience God's joy as we make the name of Jesus known here in our own backyard, but also throughout the earth as we continue to work together.
Thank you, Nikki, for being our IT person tonight. Good evening. My name is Amy DeVore. I am honored to serve as a lay leader for Global Impact Missions. As you saw, the last picture up there was Brad Hopper, our Minister of Missions, and he's in Tunisia tonight. He sends his regards, but he could not be here. But we're glad you're here. As you learned from the video, Global Impact Missions supports around 30 ministries, and those are local, national, and international partners. They tackle issues like poverty, homelessness, education, addiction, and human trafficking. We're here tonight to learn more about human trafficking. We hear a lot about it in the news, but do you know really what it is, or what you can do about it, or what can the church do about it? We're hoping to get answers tonight. I want to introduce our panelists, Nikki Rainey from Present Age Ministries, and Mark Blackwell from Justice Ministries. The format of the program is they're going to each talk about what they do and how they do it. They're going to show some videos, and during that time, you'll probably have some questions. But instead of raising your hand and interrupting the flow, we're going to ask you to write your questions down on this. It should be in your seat, and there should be pens scattered around. So when they're talking about something, or if you hear a statistic or something you're not sure of, please jot down a question and print so that we can read them. Then we'll collect the questions, and after they finish their talk, we're going to have a Q&A session. It's going to be moderated by our own Rob Hunter. So we appreciate your patience tonight and making it here in the rain, and I'm going to turn it over first to Nikki.
We'll see if I actually need this. I typically can talk loud enough that you won't, but I don't know if you need it for audiovisual. But prior to tonight, who is aware of human trafficking and what the issue is and the depth of the issue? I see some little, yeah. Okay. So what I thought before I got into who Present Age Ministries is and what we do, I thought I would show this little video. It's 5 minutes. It feels like it's forever because it's just the depth and the horror of it is hard to swallow. But I'm going to start us off with this video, okay?
Started when I was 12 years old. My stepdad had been laid off for about a year, and things at home were getting really bad. He had this one friend that hung out at our house all the time, and one day he told my stepdad that he could make a lot of money if he took pictures of me and put them online. That's how it started. He said if people were willing to pay, he was willing to try. He said it was the only way that we could take care of my family, and that if I didn't do it, he would make my 10-year-old sister do it. There was no way I could let that happen. I had to protect her. I felt like I had no choice. It wasn't just pictures for very long.
Pornography is a leading contributor to sex trafficking. It breeds addiction, which can lead to purchasing sex. Many actors in pornography are victims of exploitation, and many of them are minors.
I hated my own life. My dad left before I was born. And so it's just my mom taking care of my sister and me. And I know she had it hard, but she was never really there for me. She was always drinking. And when she was drunk, she would scream at us and hit us. She blamed it all on us. She told us that we were worthless and that we ruined her life. I was so angry. Heavy. So I left. I decided things would be better for me on the street. I stayed with a friend for the first couple of nights. And then another one after that. After a couple of weeks, I ended up on the street. This lady came up to me and asked me if I needed help. She seemed nice. She told me that I could stay with her and her boyfriend. I thought I would give it a try.
Millions of children in the United States run away. Most of them are running away from abusive situations at home. Many of them will be approached by a trafficker within the first few days of running away.
I was in and out of foster care my whole life. My dad abused me from the time I was too little to even remember, until he took me away. My mom was so high, she didn't even notice. I've been passed around from foster home to shelter to foster home to shelter for as long as I can remember. Nobody wanted to adopt a 10-year-old with a drug addict for a mom and a dad who abused her. One day this girl came up into the shelter. She was so pretty and naive. She wore all these nice clothes and everything. So we got real tight real fast. She took care of me like a big sis. I looked up to her. I trusted her. I felt so important when she asked me to jump the fence with her to leave her boyfriend. Like, I was going to be a part of something big and great.
Many victims of sex trafficking have been displaced from the home at some point of their lives. Some of them are recruited by other victims who have been manipulated into doing so.
I had a pretty normal life. My parents worked a lot. They weren't bad parents. I was a cheerleader. I'd give anything to go back to that life. My parents were putting a lot of pressure on me about college and stuff, and so we were arguing like all the time. I needed some space. My home life was dull, and so I knew I really wanted something adventurous and exciting. So I met this guy online, and I guess I kind of saw him as my break from reality for a while. He was always inviting me to stuff, and it seemed really fun. I felt like he understood me better than anyone.
The internet is a growing tool used by human traffickers and other predators to lure teens into relationships for the purpose of abuse and exploitation. It is said that 100% of victims who have been targeted online have gone willingly to meet their trafficker or predator.
So that video is kind of hard to watch, but it shows 4 different scenarios, 4 different victims from different types of homes, different backgrounds, and I can say we have encountered most of those. They come from 2-parent homes, single-parent homes, every background. So when people and I come and speak to them, they're like, it's not happening here. It might be happening in Center Charlotte or down off of Sugar Creek. It's just not happening here. And I can tell you it most certainly is. And Mark would attest to that, and he can give examples. But hopefully by the time we start walking through things tonight, you'll be able to have some idea of what human trafficking is and what it's not, and what it looks like and how you can sort of be part of the solution. Let's see if my clicker is working or if everything has gone. Oh, it is. Yes, we have success. So our mission at Present Age Ministries is to combat the sexual abuse and exploitation of teen girls. So those who are under the age of 18, and we specifically cater to women. We equip communities to prevent and identify victims while providing a safe place for survivors to transition to independence. Our core programs, I like to say we have 2 parts of the house. We have a front end of the house that's going to bring awareness, which is what we're doing tonight. I'm bringing awareness to you. We also will do prevention. We'll go into school systems or talk with youth groups or anyone who's encountering youth, teenagers, and we'll talk with them because it's just so much easier to prevent than it is to bring restoration to a victim who's already gone through that trauma. But then when it happens, we have direct services that we will provide a holistic plan to address 5 key areas: the medical, psychological, relational, intellectual, and spiritual. I love it, and I'm sure Mark would agree, we love when we get to come and talk to churches because we can say, this is where we find our hope. Tonight's going to be a really dark topic, but we know as a ministry, we are faith-based, and our hope is saving grace, and the only answer to this is through Jesus Christ. And so when we get to come out, we get to share that. So we do not force our beliefs on any of the girls, but when they come to us and say, well, why do you care? Nobody else cares. We get to say, because my Jesus loves you just as much as he loves me. And we want to walk this ugly path with you. Collaboration is key. We can't do it alone. There's no way that I can be everywhere where you are, have the connections that you have. Oh, we're missing one somehow. We're missing one. which is the other nonprofits. So local and federal law enforcement, we will partner with the FBI or local departments, whether it's in Concord or whether it's here in Mecklenburg, so that when they get a victim who's a minor and they say, hey, can you just come check things out and see, is this really abuse or exploitation or trafficking, or is there just poor choices being made? And so we can come in and do an assessment with that. Medical and health professionals, oftentimes we'll get girls who haven't had any care in years, and we end up having minors who are placed in the hospital because they have STDs, or their kidney is in just failure and they're in shutting down and we have to go through dialysis, or they're pregnant. I can't tell you, we've had a number of girls that have come to us that have been pregnant for their life. And again, they're all teenagers. So without those medical partners, we can't get through the system quick enough. The bottom left-hand corner that you guys can't see right now is other nonprofit businesses. We have to play the same sandbox together, and it's not we have to, we get to, because there's some things that we do really well and there's something that Justice does really well, and we all have a different key. There's different parts of the pie that we all have to be able to eradicate this issue. And then educators in schools, we have the very distinct privilege of being able to go into schools. We have curriculum that we were able to take in, and we are able to tell 7th and 8th graders specifically. There's a bill that was passed in 2015 that says they have to know what sex trafficking is and how to help prevent it. So we are able to go in, even as a faith-based organization, to go in and teach in public schools. Okay, now we're to the issue. Human trafficking has two pieces. Human trafficking is just an umbrella. Underneath human trafficking, there's sex trafficking and there's labor trafficking. Present Age Ministries focuses solely on sex trafficking. We have had some contact with those who are labor victims, but that is not nearly the volume that we see here in the Charlotte area, at least for our organization. Human trafficking defined. I'm going to throw all these up because I have learned late in the evening, late in the afternoon to bring candy. Is someone willing to read what the definition of sex trafficking is? For a Snickers. I'll even throw two at you. Yes, ma'am.
I'll just read it.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sex trafficking occurs when someone uses force, fraud, or coercion to cause a commercial sex act with an adult or causes a minor to commit a commercial sex act.
Yeah, so in North Carolina, if you are under the age of 18, which is who we service, you're a victim. Doesn't matter, we don't have to prove fraud, force, or coercion, but if you're over the age of 18, the prosecution has to be able to prove that there was fraud, that there was force, or there was coercion, and then that's why you were trafficked, or why you were performing the acts that you were performing. How about commercial sex act? Can someone read that one for me?
A commercial sex act includes prostitution, pornography, and sexual performance done in exchange for any item of value, such as money, drugs, shelter, food, or clothes.
Do you want your Snickers? So anything that is done in exchange, you can share, done in exchange for an item of value. Has anyone ever thought about pornography being a commercial sex act? When it is done in exchange for an item of value, it is considered a commercial sex act. So we talked about force, fraud, or coercion. Those are the three things that have to be proven, and typically this is how it happens. So this is why we talk about it even as a minor organization. Force, causing serious harm or physical restraint to someone. Can anybody think of an example of what that might look like?
Well, the little girl, the 13-year-old, who was kidnapped first this week.
So kidnapping would be. Kidnapping with the intent of performing or having the victim perform sexual acts would be sex trafficking. Don't know what the intent, or if she might have been underneath one of these other ones. So let's talk about the other ones, but that's exactly what force would be. If anybody's seen the movie Taken, yep, that's what force is, but that's not how it happens. Oftentimes that's very, very few percentage of the time where it's done forcefully. How about fraud, making false promises and deceitful behavior? Who can think of an example for sex trafficking with fraud?
Online.
Online, what about online?
The example you showed, where they get in and they get your confidence,
Yep.
and you trust them, and you go out and it's not good sex.
Yeah, maybe I'm meeting somebody who I think is a 13-year-old boy, but really is a 48-year-old man. That would be fraud. But one example that I like to give that makes it a little bit easier to grasp is modeling careers. I'm going to make you a big star. Oh, you're so beautiful. Your parents don't think you're beautiful, but I promise you, I can get you that modeling career. You're going to be in Victoria's Secret before you know it. Well, that starts out with pornography. Just a few pictures here and a few pictures there, and then it starts to do maybe pornography, nude pictures, and then the next thing you know, I need you to go to the back room. Okay? So that's the easiest example that I can come up with fraud. How about coercion? Threats of serious harm to physical restraint against a person's will. Threats to harm a victim or the victim's family, psychological abuse, and confiscation of identification documents. Anybody think of an example? The story that I like to tell is that there is a girl, maybe she's 17, she's dating this guy, he's older, they're in love, and they're at a party on the other side of town. She has no idea where she is, so she has no idea how to get home. But they've been dating for a while, so she really trusts this guy. And then all of a sudden, there's an emergency. He doesn't have gas to get home, or his car's broken down. Oh, babe, we gotta make some more money. We just gotta get home. Can you go to the back room? And can you just look at it? I know it's wrong. I don't want you to do it, but we've got to make some quick money so we can get home. No, I'm not doing it. That's the stupidest thing. No. And he'll pull out his phone and say, is this your baby sister? Just like that first example. Is this your baby sister? Well, if you don't do what I'm asking you, I'm going to have her picked up and I'm going to make her do it. She's a minor. She's a teenager. If you have a picture of my child, I will do whatever you ask me to. Cognitively, I can still process through that. But as a teenager, they can't. So that's what coercion is. Does that example make sense to everyone? Does it make sense to anybody? Yeah. Okay, thank you. There we go. You're awake. Okay, how this happens. Traffickers use fear, which leads to violence, and then intimidation and threats to ensure compliance and meet demand. Society will call it prostitution, but federal law calls it trafficking. When someone is forced to have sex 15 to 20 times a night with someone who's purchasing them, is that prostitution? No. When there's force, what is that considered? It's also, we call it rape. Yeah. These girls, and Mark might have different numbers, but our girls are told that they're raped 15 to 20 times a night. Again, they won't use the word rape because they don't think they're being forced to do it. They think that they're doing it willingly. But that's that part of coercion, the manipulation that happens on the background. So even our verbiage that we use is not quite accurate. So these are some avenues for how it happens. Internet-based is by far the most frequent used. In our age of technology, we can punch somebody in, we can order a girl here quicker than we can have a pizza. Someone could be here quicker than a pizza could get made. Forget the delivery, then be made. And all you have to do is just set up an appointment. So child pornography, gang-based activity is really rough here in Charlotte. We've had girls that have come to us with the word whore carved in their leg, or they've been barcoded. Not more frequently, but often you will see girls that are branded with their pimp's tattoo, either in the webbing of their hand or across their eyelids, on the inside of their lips, the back of their neck, because that's his property. He is a businessman. He is making a profit off of her in upwards of $150,000 a year per one girl. So that's his property, and he needs to brand it so all the other pimps stay away from her. But they will be branded with tattoos, and the gang base is one of the big activities. Stripping, no one wants to be at a strip club. Oftentimes the pimps are sitting out in the parking lot. You can't come home till you make a certain quota. That's still exploitation. Escort services, phone sex lines, and erotic massages. At one point, it's down. I think there's only like 60 that are still around in Charlotte that are fronting for other services in the back of those massage parlors. Recruitment. This is how, from our tracking, that we are seeing recruitment. Transit stations, mall. There is a large mall in the Charlotte area that is referred to as the hub. I'm not allowed to say the name. We've gotten our hands slapped before, but it is a very large tourist attraction. We'll just leave it at that. But girls often, they'll tell us that it is the hub. We're going to the hub. I got to meet somebody at the hub. But that's where recruitment happens. So anywhere that there's a large congregation of youth, that is where pimps are going to come in and talent scout. That's just the best way to define it. They are scouting, looking for new recruits. On the internet, we talked about on the track, other neighborhoods, bars and clubs, home neighborhood. You guys, do you see that's the second highest recruitment is in their home? So that means other victims are in their neighborhood recruiting for them. They are getting $100 a pop to go into their neighborhood or go to their local football game and say, hey, I need you to come with me. We got this really cool thing going on. It's not really cool, but it. And then the number one is social networks. When we do parent nights, we'll bring parents and youth in together, and then we'll separate them out, and we'll tell parents, look, there's no reason why your children needs to be on multiple social media sites. For those of you who are teenagers in here, I'm sorry. There has to be some boundaries, and making sure you understand what they're doing on those social media sites. I see some laughing at me now. It's not because mom and dad hate you. It is truly for your protection, because oftentimes we'll friend people that we don't know that seem innocent, but you don't know who's on the other side. So just being cautious. But 90% of our victims have met their perpetrator online through social media. So that's the number one recruit. Is this really happening? Do you see where we are? This image is produced by a national organization. This is called Polaris. And so I have some cards here, and I'll show up. You can pick them up over at the table. But these are know the signs. So what happens is whenever a tip is reported in or a case is reported and identified, it lights up this map. So what color are we in Charlotte? Red. We're red. Yay. Yay, Charlotte. We are red. Why do you think we're red? Roads, highways, transit. Yes, transit. It makes it very easy to move a girl from Florida in the morning to Atlanta in the afternoon, then up here to Charlotte, and then we can go up to DC and just work our way up and down the East Coast. What else?
Sports.
Yeah, sports. Sports brings what?
Money.
Brings money. What else does it bring? It brings people. More importantly, it brings men, which are what my demand is going to be. So I need to bring in girls to meet that demand. What else? Anytime that there's conventions here, that demand or that supply has to be brought in to meet that demand. Anytime that there's airports, large international airports, it just makes it really easy to move around. But I think more importantly, we have a lot of high-paying jobs here in Charlotte. So what could be a quick service? I'm gonna censor myself since we have some younger kids in here. What could be a quick $20 service? Yeah, that might be I just need a quickie, if you will. And then, but for overnight, that's going to cost some money. You know, that's going to cost some money, and that's not something somebody working at McDonald's is going to be able to afford. So a lot of those white-collar jobs. Is this really happening? At least 100,000 to 300,000 youth are at risk commercially in the United States. This does not include the numbers for smuggling across borders. This is just domestic. And at least 100,000 children are used in prostitution. There's that word again, every year in the United States. So that 300,000 number, imagine the Panther Stadium being filled 4 times with minors. And that's the number that we're trying to help you grasp tonight, okay? And then at least 100,000 are used in prostitution. That would be the Panther Stadium 1.5 times. The most common age for entry into the sex industry is 12 to 14. How many of you know someone? I see some moms starting to pull a little bit closer. How many of you know someone who's 12 to 14? Yeah. Forget 12 to 14. I have a 5-year-old little girl, and that's terrifying. And I don't want you to leave without hope tonight. I definitely don't want you to leave without hope, but I want you to be rational and understand what is really happening here. North Carolina ranks among the top 15. We say among because we bounce around year to year, and the next slide will show that. But all reports place the Charlotte metro area as number 1 in the state. Doesn't matter what year, we are always number 1. And when I say Charlotte metro, that includes Matthews, that includes Pineville, Gastonia, and Concord. That includes the surrounding areas. It's not just within the Belt Loop, okay? North Carolina stats. In 2015, we were 15th in line. In 2016, we were 10th, and this year we are number 8. When I told Amy, she's like, no. And I said, that's okay. I think it's not that there's necessarily more or less cases going on. I just think we're doing a better job of identifying it and calling that 800 number. So there's more reported cases, okay? And certainly that's what we want you to do, is to report it. In our community, a lack of knowledge leads to misidentification, which will lead to further victimization. How many of you have walked around a mall or a park and said, oh my goodness, honey, where's your mom? Why are you dressed like that? That is just, you look like a skank. I mean, seriously, I've done it. I do it and I look at it, but that is further victimization due to a lack of knowledge. What would it look like if we started looking past that and saying, oh, why is she wearing cutoff shorts and cowgirl boots in the snow. That's not right. So there may be other reasons why she's dressed like that, but there's certainly not a logical reason for why she's dressed like that. Maybe it's poverty. I don't know. But let's look past it and not further victimize her by labeling and stereotyping her. Let's just help her. Let's just try to see past all of these surface, because they are hard and they are tough and they're going to cuss you out if you ask them a question. It's just how they are, because they've had to get like that, right? If they're forced to service men 15 to 20 times a night, you're going to have a thick skin. Understanding the victim. Oh, that one's an important one. I want to say it is estimated that 70 to 90% of exploited children have a history of child sex abuse. 99% of our victims that have come through have had some form of exploitation. I don't even think we talk about it anymore with them, because we just know it's going to happen. Mark, you might have something different than I do. Yeah. And does anybody want to guess at what age that abuse typically starts happening? I heard 10. 5. And that just makes me sick. But what happens at age 5 is forced on them. Maybe it's their uncle that lives with them, or their neighbor across the street that's touching them inappropriately. Well, that was not welcomed. I didn't want that. I didn't ask for that. But that's when I'm identifying what love is and what trust is and what hope is. So now that I'm 13, 14, 15, whatever, and this man's saying he loves me and I want to be with him, well, that's my choice. It's not being forced on me. So if he needs me to go do this, that's not as bad as it was when I was 5. So those who were victimized very early on, if they don't get help and have that trauma unpacked, it puts a target on them for when they're older. It just does. I've told you about talent scouts. They know how to scout it out. There's a vulnerability there. I can exploit that one. Oh, there's one right there. I can work on that one. They know how to do it. So if it has happened to you, I'm so sorry, because statistically it happens to 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men. I'm so very sorry, and it is not your fault. But if it's not addressed, even at this age, it can do unreparable damage. Victims are more likely to behave in a manner that is difficult to deal with, and to run away frequently, to be arrested or involved in other issues. They believe that they're in love and special to their trafficker, and they do not identify as a victim. So if you're going around looking for people to say, help me, they don't. They think they're in love and they don't need any help, and they know something's not right, and it's kind of weird that he's got 4 other girls hanging around with him, but I'm his favorite and he loves me, so I am not a victim. I am choosing this. It is so hard. So when the girls come to us, if they don't want help, if they're not ready to get help, we can't force it on them because they're not ready. As awful as it is, and we know what they're going into, if they're in imminent damage, we're not allowed to. But we can't force them. We can't force them to get help. But they do not identify as a victim. Common risk factors. These can be risk factors for a variety of things. And I have, in those little cards that I showed you, the pink cards, we have some sitting over there that you can take home. These can be risk factors for just about anything, for drug use, for incarceration. It can be for a variety of things. But what stands out to you guys? Is there any on this list that stands out to you?
Abuse.
Abuse, yeah. We talked about the abuse, how that is a big, big trigger. What else?
Mental health.
Mental health, yeah. Anxiety, low self-esteem, true mental issues would be a big target for someone to exploit. What else? Did you have one up here? No?
Glorification.
Yeah, glorification of pimp culture. Their media just loves to do it in our songs, and we don't even realize that it's in the songs anymore. Access to technology. We talked about that. That all of our teenagers, all of us, everybody has their phone with them tonight. I know they do. It's attached. I had to set mine down so I wouldn't have it with me. We all have access to technology. So that means our youth are on social media devices, and that the pimps can get to them, okay? And then the sexualization of girls and sexualization of boys. The music and media, we don't even realize they're doing it anymore, and we've just become so desensitized to it. So, okay, sleeping with this guy's not that bad. General warning signs. I brought up a few. The signs of abuse, tattoo and brandings is one thing, but the multiple electronic devices is the one thing that I want to pull out. If you see any youth that has multiple electronic devices, that should be a red flag, because oftentimes they're burner phones, okay, because their pimp needs to get a hold of them. The tattoo and brandings, again, we talked about and touched a little bit on, but no one under the age of 18 should be allowed to get one. It's against the law. So if you see someone who's covered in tattoos and they look kind of young, that should be a red flag to you as well. Would you know what it looks like? Our victims say that no one cares. It's not like I choose this, I can't just walk away. So they're crying out for help. They want help, but they just don't know how to get help. They don't know how to get out. They need someone like us to stand up and say, hey, wait a second, I know, so I'm going to call in a tip, or I'm going to intervene on your behalf because you just don't know. So that is a little bit from a perspective of what the issue is and what it looks like. And I'm going to let Mark talk a little bit about Justice Ministries and what he has and what he does, and maybe some more stories that can give you a better glimpse of what human trafficking as a whole is, okay?
So Nikki did an excellent job giving just a general background, and this is about as good as education as you'll get in a 20-minute period on the topic. So Presidential Ministries does just a phenomenal job in that department. Our organization, Justice Ministries, we focus on serving victims of sex trafficking and sexual exploitation in the region. We've been based here since the beginning. We primarily have served the 50-mile radius of Charlotte, but we serve, essentially, at this point, we respond to any calls in North or South Carolina. Just if we can get there fast enough, we do our best to do it. For me, I'll give you a little background on personally how I got here, how I got involved, and then just kind of explain a little more on what we do, and maybe try to tell some stories as well to give context. For me, I was just like you in 2010. I was at a conference in Atlanta, Georgia. It was a Christian conference. A lot of speakers from all over the country were there, and they addressed a lot of social injustice issues. But it was at that time in 2010 that I learned about human trafficking for the first time. There was a few other larger national agencies, if you've heard of International Justice Mission, IJM, or potentially Not for Sale. It's based out of California. They did some presentations, and throughout that time at the conference, I just felt like God was calling me to serve this population of people. I didn't really know what that would look like. And whenever you feel God's calling you to something, you kind of go, are you sure? and I felt like he was saying, if not you, then who? My story isn't one that I didn't come out of a situation where I knew someone in the situation. I've lived a very great life with great support and solid family, and lots of resources and almost a platform as a young man. And I felt like God was saying, if you're not going to put your neck out there for those at risk, who are we looking to do it? And I felt a really specific call to serve this group of people. The human trafficking topic was beginning to come into the main media stream at that time, but it wasn't something everyone knew about. Today, it's a common knowledge thing. Matter of fact, does anybody watch Fox 46 News last night? All right, well, I was on it, but I don't blame you for not watching it. After the elections, it was a slow night for news. But yeah, so I mean, at this point in time, people kind of know, about human trafficking. Now it's about how do we really make a difference? How do we really stop it? In 2010, when I felt God had called me to this, I didn't know if that would be volunteering somewhere or serving overseas or locally. But as I sought him on it, I felt he was calling me to serve in my own backyard first. And when I learned that there was a 13-year-old girl, according to the statistics in my city of Charlotte, as a man, as a Charlottean, most importantly as a Christian, I just couldn't sit on that. I couldn't go to bed on that information. So I really did my homework. I tried to find any organization at the time from Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia that had anything to do with trafficking in the title. I met with any law enforcement, or not any of them, but a lot of law enforcement agencies and got their perspective. And at the time, there was only 100 beds nationwide designated for sex trafficking survivors. And most law enforcement were saying we're only recovering people at about, I think, 1%. Many of them were saying. And I was just blown away by that. I'm kind of a minority in this work, being a male, and a young male at that. A lot of people don't know what to think of me in some of the collective meetings. But I had a different approach. A lot of it was coming from the more awareness side and prevention side. But I couldn't deal with the idea that there are girls and women tonight in this, and what are we doing about it? So I felt called to start an organization, Justice Ministries, to focus on those that are in it right now and getting them services. So you can remember us by the 3 R's. We reach out, we help relocate, and we help rise up. Now, to unpack that a little bit, what does that mean? We have multiple outreach techniques across the community. We've historically done strip club outreach a couple times a month for the past 8 years. And we have goodie bags that we pack, and guys like myself will go and just drive and be kind of a security presence and pray, while ladies that are highly trained will go into the clubs, hang out in the locker room, and distribute essentially goodie bags filled with our hotline information. Now, why we go to strip clubs is it's one of the few places with an address that you can just show up to. Sex trafficking isn't something that you can just Google it and say, oh, there it is, let's go there. But going to strip clubs is a place that we can start, and it's a way that we can kind of keep our pulse on the beat of the sex industry in Charlotte. Certainly not everyone working in a strip club is trafficked, but like Nikki said, some are, and we've seen it. We've seen girls that are being trafficked, or the pimp is waiting in the parking lot and he's taking all the money. That's a form of trafficking. But the main reason we start there is it's kind of a gateway. When you're in a place in your life where you're willing to go in to a facility to take off your clothes for money, then you're at a very vulnerable place for things even more severe happening. So we hand out cards there. We've historically done various street outreach techniques in the region, and just through kind of word of mouth, we get our hotline information out there. So we launched our hotline in 2012, and I'm directly concurrent with this thing. Okay, cool. And then after the hotline is launched, since then we have served roughly 300 plus individuals. Now the second R is relocation. And that's really where most people get interested. That's where our real work kicks in. Someone calls the hotline, we try to deploy a rapid relocation team to get to them as soon as possible. Hotline calls come from victims that are self-identifying. It comes from law enforcement agencies. It comes from other nonprofits that have also identified or come across someone. And occasionally it comes from a community member who is with a victim right now that they've met on the street and are looking for something to do, like trying to get them help. And in that situation, the hotline rings, we assess the situation, we send out a female victim advocate and a male driver, minimum, if not more people than that, and we do an assessment of the situation and figure out their immediate needs, and we get them out of their situation. So normally, a lot of our emergent care, it can be the first 72 hours, and it can be 3 weeks, even to 3 months, depending on the scenario that we're dealing with. So we try to get to someone within hours. This is a tight window. When a victim is willing to ask for help. You got to remember, these people have been burned by literally every human being they have met over however long they've been in this industry. They haven't met someone that didn't want something from them. So to have the courage to actually seek out help or call a number is a big deal. They're probably in a serious place of desperation, even within their circumstance. So we try to do that as quickly as we can, not make them uncomfortable, and let them almost lead how we're going to assist them. So normally that's putting them in a hotel or another safe house for a few days while we let them rest and get patched up, and then trying to make a plan according to their desire that will be a long-term solution. So housing, we can break it down into 3 categories. There's emergent housing, there's program housing, and there's transitional housing. And so what we do a lot in the emergency services is clearly emergent housing. It's just somewhere to go that's safe, to let the dust settle and get you some help. Program housing is something more established, sometimes a 12-month arrangement or a 2-year arrangement. So the Hannah's Heart housing through the foster care program is more of a program house. It is structured. There's probably a start date and an end date, and it takes applications and paperwork to start it. And the other piece is transitional housing, and that's when someone finishes a shelter or finishes a program and they're ready to move on with independence in their life, whether it's a minor that's now turned 18 or whether it's an adult that's completed a 12-month program. Now what do? And we find really vulnerable areas are in that emergency side and that transitional side. If you have no dollar to your name and just the clothes on your back, you don't have access to a printer and a notary and resources to apply to get into a long-term program 2 states away. So you need a group like ours to help you in the immediate, that can fund your immediate needs and fund your travel and transport to help you with our network get connected to those kind of places. And the other vulnerable space is once you've completed a program, if you're still struggling, and the biggest issue is if you've never come to know the Lord and you don't value yourself, it's really tough to convince a survivor to go work for minimum wage when they know that, hey, I used to be worth $500 a night. Maybe I'll just go work for myself and get back into prostitution. that's a big issue. So we want to be there on the transitional piece to walk alongside them and try to encourage them to move forward, that they have self-worth, and that, hey, you got to stay out of this if you want to have long-term success. But for us, the ultimate change we've seen is really only when Jesus, when they accept Jesus into their heart. Other than that, we're kind of putting a Band-Aid on something that needs surgery. Nonetheless, we're called to serve and love on them and minister to them however we can. So just remember that. There's different kinds of housing. Well, safe houses are thrown out a lot in this talk and culture, but I would define a safe house as something immediate, probably not publicized, probably not talked about. But there are program houses that are called safe houses too, and I get that. That kind of gives you a sense. And our Rise Up portion is that transitional care piece. It's after someone's been out of their life for a year or more and they're wanting to move forward with life, we help them with rent assistance, paying for counseling services if they have children, pay for child care services, and find maybe potential educational opportunities or work placement. Any of us, when we were in our late teens, early 20s, we had to start our independent adult life, right? Very few of us did it totally on our own. Most of us need some help, some guidance, some support through that process. And essentially our transitional piece is just helping these young ladies walk through that. And we're doing it with a special understanding and patience that we're most people that are traumatized in traffic, their maturity level stops at the point of trafficking. So you may be dealing with a 28-year-old that has the maturity of a 14-year-old. And that takes a different kind of patience than someone you just met. So with that, we spend a lot of our funding and energy on that transitional piece to hopefully see long-term success so that not only get out of trafficking, but they stay out. I could talk for a very long time, and I know we would run out of time, but that's kind of gives you a general sense of where we're coming from. The work we do is pretty dangerous. We work with law enforcement whenever that is a possibility. We really try to follow the systems that exist, but due to urgencies and necessities, sometimes we do have to do things on our own or just with whatever agency is in the region. And rapid relocation teams is still something that's being built across North and South Carolina. You have a Mecklenburg or a Union County, and there's a full rapid response team, and things are kind of already in place. But right now, even across North Carolina, I think there's some close to 50 or 60 counties that don't even have an established rapid response team, and similar numbers in South Carolina. So they need agencies like ours that can kind of fill the gaps and get in and try to make sense of what's going on so that that survivor doesn't get displaced within the potential opportunity to get rescued. I'll probably pause there. And that's right. I got a video to show you guys. This is a video of just some testimony from survivors that we've worked with. I don't post it on YouTube or anything. This is just a single file because I wouldn't want their identities to be exposed later. So please don't video it or take pictures of it. We're very cautious about those things. But here's a video to kind of give their sense on what our ministry's meant to them and where they're at in life.
Okay. And if you couldn't hear that, we're going to pass a basket around. If any of you have written down questions, please drop them into there. My name is Rob Hunter again, and I will say that I have been blessed in my life to have 2 careers now that I absolutely love. Being part of this church ministry here as Associate Youth Director is just a blessing to me that came after a 30-year career in law enforcement here in the town of Matthews. And I can share with you that if you don't think this has happened in our community or isn't happening tonight in our community, you're just living in bliss. And I use those words because my wife used those words recently, that she was just totally unaware of what happens around. I can tell you that I have been in businesses here. There was a massage parlor here in town several years ago. 2 women that were working in there, an owner-operator, but 2 women that were working there who had been trafficked here from Southeast Asia. They were having to live in the back of this place and had their passports taken away. They had no means to go or do anything other than what they were there for. I have been in apartment buildings in this community that were legally leased by someone. And the only items that we saw in these apartments were either mattresses or sheets on the floor. Multiple areas. We were in there to recover a 14-year-old runaway girl who had been pulled into that. I can pretty much say any motel that you can think of here in our community. We have made prostitution arrests in those motels or hotels. So it is all around us, and sometimes we can get caught up into our own daily lives and experiences and not see it. And the things that these two organizations do are just so tremendously critical. And I would say probably the biggest takeaway I would suggest tonight is the awareness, to kind of open your eyes, open your hearts. If you don't feel comfortable in approaching or saying something to someone, call. You have information here, call. But what was particularly striking in those closing words there was to hear this woman say that she needed to forgive herself. And I hear those words and I think she's forgiving herself for getting into something that she did not want to get into by probably all chances. So thank y'all for being here tonight. Okay, so we have some questions here. So for Mark, for Justice Ministries, where do you get your funding?
So we're totally private funding right now, just individuals, churches, local businesses. We have been around the $200,000 mark for the past couple years, and we need to be at about $500,000 a year, but we've had a hard time getting to that level. It's an interesting thing. A lot of what we do is covert and clandestine, and it's kind of an interesting thing to market. So we don't always have the opportunity to do some of the funding sources that another nonprofit may be able to. But yeah, basically just all private right now. We are applying for a few grants. Far too often, the grants go to renovating a nature walk or something really important like that. But I think the human trafficking topic, and Nikki can attest to, it's very tough to get government funding. And even when you could qualify, it normally comes with strings attached, as if 40% of what you're going to get ties you up and doesn't actually let you do the work you need to do. So, but yeah, by the grace of God, we're totally funded by individuals and churches and local businesses right now.
Awesome. And actually, I'll ask you the same question.
Yeah, it's the same, all in-kind donations, and Mark's exactly right. Oftentimes we can't get government grants or funding because we are faith-based, and so to the God that has the thousands of cattle on the hill, is He provides and knows what we need, and we may think we need more, but all in-kind donations.
Yeah, we both sit on the government task forces.
They love getting our advice.
They use us, they just don't fund us.
Okay. Now this one goes to one that I just spoke about a moment ago, and I heard you cite statistics earlier about massage parlors and those kind of decreasing in numbers. But we did have someone ask, is there an outreach or a help to those victims or those employees working in that business, and also what steps may be taken to help shut down those types of businesses?
I know Vigilante Truth, which is another organization. Bo's the CEO's, his passion is to do a lot with the massage parlors, and they will oftentimes just sit in the parking lot and more or less shame the men who are going in there when they know something's going to happen. But in terms of a direct, I would say Bo's probably on the forefront, and you guys are probably doing something. But again, until the victim's ready to get help, there's not really a whole lot that can be offered. They will want to go back. They'll want to go back and work and make money so they can make a living, and rightly so. So, not from our organization. There's other organizations. You want to tackle that?
Yeah, so like massage parlors, was that the question? So we've done some direct action with massage parlors, trying to get a sense of what's going on and try to offer help and get them shut down. There's close to 50 in this area of town. I mean, within the 45 kind of belt line, and they come and go. They're like weeds. You get one shut down, two more pop up. They change owners and LLC contracts, and the same business will be happening under a different name at the same location after the next one gets shut down. Most of it is ethnically based, and I think that normally has ties to larger criminal organization rings. A side note, a lot of what we've been dealing with is more individuals, oftentimes U.S. citizens, that are working with what I call small-time operators. It's one guy working 2 to 6 girls, and he's basically selling girls instead of drugs now, because it's actually less dangerous to sell people than it is kilos of cocaine. So with the massage parlors, they're normally involved with larger rings, more sophisticated in their secrecy, and the people that are stuck there are way more afraid of their employers than they are of the police or even people trying to, help like us. So normally they kind of shoo us off. We've done a few outreach opportunities where we'll even ask dumb questions and just kind of hold them up and keep their attention. And if we get someone who seems like they are, willing to talk, we'll try to offer a hotline number and an opportunity to get out. It's extremely difficult to work in those areas. And like she said, Vigilante Truth has done some essentially data collection by watching and doing observe and report on those agencies and locations. But it's very difficult. We're not giving up on it. We're just having to always go back to the drawing board on ways to approach it and try to help those individuals.
And I can't share to you from a legal perspective, because we've really dealt with this through the police department. It's like every industry has lobbyists, both state and federal, and there are so many different protections that are put in place. For example, the town of Matthews tried to write specific ordinances in such a way, legally, to try to push massage parlors out of the city. Same thing with topless bars. And there are so many protections that are built in, probably through the work of lobbyists, to put those particularly federal protections in, where it makes it almost impossible for a local government to try to do that. In many instances, locally you can enact an ordinance that outzones or dezones, if you will, for example, parcels for topless bars. But through law, anything that's existing is grandfathered in until they're closed and closed down for at least a year. And that law changed many years ago when we were really pushing hard on a couple of locations here in town to try to shut them down or to push them out, which is a sad result. And the law changed from 6 months to 12 months or a year, that the place had to be vacant and not operating before they lose their zoning. So it is frustrating where the protections come from sometimes. And I think this would probably go to either or both. So how many victims that contact you or that you work with do you either find or believe return back into a trafficking life?
Being that we deal with minors, I would imagine the number is much lower of return rate. That's not to say that we don't have victims who run away from where our housing looks a little bit different because they are minors. So they can be in their home, in their biological home, if it's deemed safe. And we get numerous calls from whoever their parents be, whether it's foster parents or biological parents or short-term housing that says they've ran away from home. Well, oftentimes we know that they've reached back out to the perpetrators just because that's all they know. We look at it and we say, why do they do that? Well, that's all they know. I can think of one victim who I became fairly close with, which it was scarier for her to go and hold down a real job, what we deem as a real job, working 9 to 5 in confined quarters, making minimum wage that would not support her children that she had from the life. It was scarier for her to do that than to go back out and sell herself. She had the support growing up to understand these are life skills that we can help you get. This is how we can help you. It was just so scary and so taxing and stressful for her to have to go back and do what society deems as normal than to go back to what she knows. And so I would imagine, and at that point she had already become an adult, so there wasn't, legally she was 18, so there wasn't anything that we could do to prevent her from making those choices. I imagine you see that a lot.
Absolutely. It's a tough stat for me to throw out. If I had to guess, I would say somewhere around 30%. Probably do return at least in some capacity. Now, that's not to say they won't come out again. Mm-hmm. We've had many clients that we helped them initially, after a couple weeks, went back into it, and then 3 months later called us again, and we went through the same process all over again. And sometimes more than that, sometimes another round and another round. But for our end, so much of our work is on that emergent side. It's getting them out initially, getting them patched up, finding a long-term place, and sending them out of state. And in this world, everyone's using aliases and burner phones. So once we get them set with their next place that's a 12-month program, it's really up to the client to follow up with us. We haven't changed our number, but if they change theirs and don't reach out, I actually don't know where they finally ended up or where they're at today. There's some of them, It's just not information we have. But if I had to guess, there was a time in some of our peak seasons where I felt like it was probably about a third go back into it. So if that helps, but it's really tough to put a figure on that. And either way, our job is to be here and help. Like I've mentioned in some of our videos, our model's that of the Good Samaritan. We're just seeing someone beaten up and in distress off the side of the road. We're saying, we'll put you on our donkey, on our dime, or y'all's dime, the church's dime, and help you as long as we can in this right now time. However, if the guy that got beaten up, if he gets robbed again a year later, and it happens. So it's the people we're working with and survivors of human trafficking are unfortunately very vulnerable for re-exploitation. All the more reason where it's really important that we show the love of Jesus, and Lord willing that they come to know him and get themselves plugged in with the church and a new community and new people that are really going to support them and love on them with no strings attached.
And if I can, I'm going to piggyback off of that. You said it was that they become re-exploited again, and I think it's because until those deep-rooted issues are really pulled out, that trauma is pulled out and the therapy is sought, and ultimately, I think you've heard from both of us say that until they find the grace and love and forgiveness of Jesus Christ, it's just putting Band-Aids on the situation. But I think until those deep-rooted issues are really addressed, there is a high risk of returning.
Nikki, I think this would be for you, and I'll read this as it is. It says, I know there's increasing instances of children recruiting children in our schools. Mm-hmm. How prevalent is that, and what are you seeing in this area?
Yeah, no, we do know that for a fact, that there are boys or girls who will be given $100 for every recruit that they're brought in. They do it at high school football games. So it is absolutely, and oftentimes if it's a female that's doing it, that means she doesn't have to go out and solicit for the evening. If she can bring in recruits, then she doesn't have to sell herself for that night. But it is absolutely, we do know for certainty that it's happened. And I can tell you that we have gotten, I think from 9 of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg high schools and from all of the Cabarrus County high schools, we have had victims pulled out. I feel confident that there's more that I can say we have statistics on that information.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I'm gonna add, because I was speaking to our program director today, and I'm like, Kayla, I kind of feel like there was a girl down here. Can you just give me a number? Because I was speaking down in Valentine this afternoon, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm taking a girl home today that lives off of Providence. So we have someone who's active right now from the neighborhood, from the community. And I think oftentimes we like to think, well, maybe it's Valentine's not happening here. Maybe it's Matthews, it's not happening here. It's probably more in the inner cities. It's not. I mean, she drove her home today at 4 o'clock. Can I take her question?
Sure.
Several years ago, there was a parent of a student in South Bend who had been selling for daughter's services.
So we had one example, and I'll share it very quickly so we can continue on with the questions, but we had one victim who was a male who had came to us. One of his best friends had been through our training, so she knew what to look for. And his parents were housing parties in their homes and selling out their son in these parties. But by the time he had come to us, he just turned 18, and he just wanted it to stop. He just wanted to get on, he wanted to get to college, and he wanted it to stop. So we sort of look at him like, how does parents do that? Not all parents are like that. Oftentimes parents refer their children to us. But absolutely, the parents do exploit their children. And what I say is that's typically a pattern because they were exploited. That's all they know. So again, it's hard to not further victimize them or to try and look past the behavior. And I'm sure that they need the grace extended to them as well. Doesn't mean there's not consequences for their actions, right? They're adults and the law's still going to prosecute them, but we need to extend grace.
So do you do any work with kind of the rehab programs, AA and A, those, and those vulnerable adults in those groups?
Yeah, so obviously Dove's Nest, I'm sure y'all have heard of them, rehabilitation, and there's other rehabilitation services in surrounding counties. Interesting fact that we've dealt with from our numbers, a lot of our clients are not addicted to a drug, which was news to me as I got into this. I expected everyone would be. But we've only had probably less than 20 on heroin, which I found to be a little bit surprising because you'd think, oh, heroin, that's what we always hear. That you get them on heroin and you got them. that's not really been our experience. And again, I'm only speaking to the data that we've experienced, but certainly, we use any of the surrounding agencies that are available. Some are free, some are not, and that gets interesting. Try to get them kind of sponsored if we can, but that's a big deal. I mean, unfortunately, most of the time, since we're getting people out in the wee hours of the morning and it's 2 a.m. and people have business hours and they're closed, if we have someone who's coming off of heroin and they need to hit in the next 3 hours, we normally just have to go to one of the ERs and let those physicians help us almost detox them in the hospital, which is not an ideal way to detox. But that's oftentimes our best option late at night.
Okay.
Maybe the last question.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, can you add one more question? How can the church help?
Sure. And I will say that was written on several cards.
Okay.
How can we help?
Yeah, so lots of ways. Obviously, financial partnership is huge. As I mentioned, we're totally privately funded. We talk a lot about building an army to fight trafficking. In my experience, and I used to say that a lot, those that are going to do the 2 a.m. work, the direct contact work, is almost more special operators. And the Army is the one sending them and equipping them, or being maybe the round two folks for mentorships and discipleship, and just being their friend once they've gotten some healing and help. That's the unpopular work. Everyone wants to be in the van when we're going out to, maybe you don't, I don't know. But I feel like people, they really get excited about this one time. Oh, what a rush, we helped somebody and I stayed up all night, yay. It gets old after a while. The hard work is saying, hey, I'm going to be this person's friend or mentor for the next 15 years. That's really loving people like Jesus. That's real hard work, and that's really what we need for the long term to help girls stay out. So being willing to be a long-term mentor, or being willing to be a long-term funder, not just a one-time gift, but saying, I'm going to give $20 a month for the next 3 years, or however long. That equips us and equips this organization to really function well. And let the highly trained, highly experienced people go out at 2 a.m. where things are highly dangerous as well. So yeah, I would say that's volunteerism for the long haul, and funding in the right now is a big deal. A new project that you mentioned, I've talked about housing in different types. We always go back to the drawing board every now and then and try to experiment and find ways to do things efficiently and low budget. We're right now launching a new project with a mobile safe house. Everyone's seen the tiny house shows, I'm sure. It's pretty fun. Well, right now we're building a tiny house. We've built all the exterior and got it dried in with windows and roof and exterior stuff. And now we need to raise another $9,000 or so to do the interior. My hope is to build up to 5 of these tiny houses, strategically place them around the region, and rotate them every 3 months or 6 months into different locations. The reason we're doing this is we've had multiple safe houses throughout the past 6 years. They don't last that long. You can have all the confidentiality agreements in the world, but it's only as secure as your most recent guest. So those locations get burned. Praise God, we never purchased. We've only rented. Because otherwise, that hurts to spend big money on something that now we can't use anymore. Compromisation just happens with safe houses. So we've done rental agreements and oftentimes have landlords that are willing to donate the rent and things like that for our brick and mortar houses. But we get this idea, hey, why don't we build houses that we can move? And then kind of took this tiny house approach. And now the tiny house program would only really work for one victim at a time. And the strategy would be you'd have the tiny house and maybe like a camper or something for the victim advocate and support staff. And you'd have different locations that we could rotate through. And instead of spending out the wazoo at the hotels, hey, use that when they're available. So that's a really practical way that a church literally could build one on campus, like a Habitat project. And when it's done, we can come pick it up. So the tiny house project is new. It's brand new. We're in the beta testing phase right now. But I think it has great potential. So any of you men that maybe are builders or craftsmen, let's talk about that. Once we finish this first house, I'll have a better idea of the real budget. Right now I'm anticipating about $18,000 for the full project, which is pretty efficient. We're going bare bones. We're not making them fancy. But But yeah, so tiny house project is the most tangible way. The immediate needs that we do have are people that can just, I would really rather have someone commit to $5 a month than give me $500 right now. I really would. We're trying to build out a budget so we can hire the right people and expand services. And then just other ways, a few of you, and you really need to be called. If you're just interested, be patient with yourself and see if this interest sticks 3 months from now. If you feel the Lord is calling you to this, then let's talk. And there may be opportunities for long-term service as well.
Yeah, it's not something you just show up and say, hey, I want to do this. And, you do have to be called. You have to feel like it's something God's asking you to do. In terms of how can you help Present Age Ministries, again, as we both said, that we are in-kind donations, and I would agree with Mark. Those monthly partners make a huge difference because it allows us to set a budget. So we can know how many victims we can take in and how much staff we can staff. When we get these huge lump sums, it's great, but it's only as good for how long we can budget it. Maybe $500 we can spread over a year, but then what do we do next year? So donations is definitely one. We have several programs that we love for people to come and assist with, but since we are a minors organization, you probably will never come into contact with our victims. Some of the few ways, if you just feel that passion is, and after you've wrestled over it and prayed with God about if that's what you're supposed to do, we have mentorships where we, like Mark's mentioned, we have a mentor that's assigned to each victim, and you have to show up no matter what. If you say you're going to show up, you show up no matter what. So if they're calling you at 2 a.m. and you're in another country, you're going to pick up the phone and you're still going to figure out to get them what they need. It doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing, you are on the line to be their life support. So that's mentorship. We also have started a new program for adoption. What we found is if we try and put a bunch of teenagers who have all this trauma underneath one house, they're all going to compete for somebody's attention. It just doesn't seem like it's going to end that well. So we felt like God was telling us, you need to adopt, because that's his plan A, right? He's all adopted us into his family. And so we want to adopt these girls who are still minors into a loving family that can show them day in and day out what a godly home is like. So if that's something that's laid on you, I certainly can talk to you more about it. And we have 2 of our advocates are here who can share information with you. But one very quick thing that you could do, if you're not willing to write us that $500,000 check tonight, is that we have volunteer training. And that volunteer training is the Monday after Thanksgiving. And what that does is you can just come hear more about us, and we'll give you very specific places and ways that you can get involved with us. The training is about a mile north of the Charlotte Motor Speedway, and I can show you and tell you how you can sign up. But you take 485 around. It's on Monday night. Traffic should not be that bad going that direction.
Thank you both for being here tonight. Can we just thank them by a round of applause? Thank you so much. And from Global Impact, we do want to give you a love offering. Thank you for making the trip out in the rain and being here with us. Thank all of you for being here. I know this is not a fun topic. This is a tough topic. I hope you've learned something tonight. I hope you'll stop by over here. Both ministries have some handouts and some sign-up sheets. If you feel that tug at your heart right now, please look at some of their information. Think about what you've learned. And I'm going to ask Pastor Corey to dismiss us in prayer.